also have this.
Well, that's very nice.
It's a paperweight.
Yeah, very nice. Indeed, yeah.
I think it was a crew gift.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice little thing to. Well, yeah, it's a lovely little thing to have, isn't it? A nice memento.
Yeah, it was so long ago, man. Distant memories, but good ones.
Definitely.
Okay, here's the bonus disc, and here's the. I haven't watched it in quite a while.
Yeah, I hadn't watched it for for quite a long time until I got this event together, and yeah, I really enjoyed seeing it again.
So I can play it on this other monitor over here, or
I don't know what you did last time, but if you want to do that or whatever you prefer to do, really, what was best for you?
Well, okay. I don't know. I don't remember last time.
I think last time you put it in the other side. I think whatever monitor you've got on.
Okay.
To your, but yeah, whatever you prefer, really.
I have to relearn everything.
It's one of those things. Unless you use it all the time, you kind of forget, don't you?
Well, not as young as I used to be. Well, who is? I mean, that's a stupid statement.
Well, yeah. I suppose it's better than the alternative.
I'd just like to say, well, while I'm complaining,
yeah,
what is wrong with Apple? They have to put the plugs on the back. So I got to reach around, just fumble with, and there's never enough.
They like to be unique, I think.
Yeah, well, that's the philosophy of the company. You don't know what you want, but we'll tell you what you want, and then we won't give it to you right away. And then we'll update the software, and it won't run on the old Mac. It'll run on the new Mac, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, look here. Well, this is no good. How do I do this? There it is. Okay. So, ta-da. Can you see that?
I can't see it, but I've got my copy in front of me. As long as you can see it.
All right.
So I'm going to pause on the 20th Century Fox logo like we did last time. Best place
now it's coming back to me.
To begin. I know a lot of people are.
Come on.
I know a lot of people are worried that MGM was bought by Amazon, but I'm happier that Amazon bought it than an Apple, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Why? I mean, media is so mixed up now.
Yeah, I mean, I think if Apple got hold of, a large film library, you'd have to buy an Apple Blu-ray player to play discs and only play Apple discs, and it would be like.
Yeah. Well, they got to make money somehow. Opening logos.
Yeah.
Okay. There we are, 20th Century Fox.
Okay, all done.
Owned by Disney, by the way.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, they own the mortgage on my house, my everything. I just it's like, stop it already.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm surprised Disney didn't go for MGM, but I suppose it may have been a monopoly thing that prevented them from doing it. But
That doesn't seem to stop them now. When are they gonna build a Walt Disney Disneyland in the UK?
oh, I don't know. I mean, the closest one we've got is obviously Disneyland Paris, but
Yeah, but that's
whether
you know. Does anybody want to go to France with especially Paris?
hmm, yeah,
I'm not biased at all, but let's face it.
well, yes, it's not like it's not the American one, is it? So, but oof, I don't know if there's room for. Well, I don't know if there's a big enough market for them over here, but I don't know. Could be. But, yeah. But eventually, the world's either going to be owned by Disney or Amazon. It's going to be one of the two, isn't it? We're all going to
Yeah,
be working for one day.
yeah,
But
and it's so strange because um, when people say Amazon, nobody thinks of the river.
no.
Yeah. Did you get something from Amazon? Yeah, I got this little bottle of water that, huh? What are you talking about?
Before we begin, do you have an opinion on Amazon buying MGM? Do you think it's a good idea?
I think I don't, well, why not?
Hmm,
It's just buying content to resell, repurpose, obviously, and uh, it's bound to happen.
hmm,
Um, things come and go, and we get to the end of certain intellectual property, which is, boy, it's complicated.
hmm.
I, I mean, there, you go to Walt Disney World, and there's MGM Studios, which, oh, so no, the unwashed masses and myself don't really understand why.
Hmm.
It's it just evidently it's supposed to um, when you have a merger, theoretically it creates a more efficient way of dealing with things, and I've never really understood it. I don't try to.
Hmm.
It just means there are more people at the top of the pyramid overseeing the people at the top of the other two pyramids.
Yes.
So you've got chairmans and CEOs and grand poobahs who just,
Yeah.
if you're creative, get out of the business.
Yeah, it seems going that way, unfortunately. Um, okay, so I'll just briefly introduce the evening, and then we'll get started. So I just want to say thank you to everybody that's joining us for tonight's watch along of Emperor Strikes Back, either live with us or on YouTube later on. I'm delighted to say that my guest is Mr. Harrison Ellenshaw, who was the matte painting supervisor on this particular film and also worked on miniatures and opticals. Mr. Earnshaw's work includes Disney's Black Hole, Honey, I Blew Up the Kids, Dick Tracy, Superman 4, Escape to LA, Ghost. Is there anything you'd like to add, Harrison, to that list?
I'm sorry.
Anything you'd like to add to that list? Of,
Uh, I'm impressed. That's about enough for me.
it's a good list to be part of, isn't it?
Well, I've I've had I've been blessed and had a charmed career. So, uh, yeah.
Pretty good, isn't it? Okay, so I think we're ready to begin the event. So if everybody's paused on the 20th Century Fox logo, I'll just give people 20 seconds or so just to make sure they're on that particular part of the film, and I'll do a countdown for 5, and we'll begin. Okay, I think we'll get started then. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, play. So whether Disney will eventually replace the 20th Century Fox,
Unlimited.
I'm not sure. So obviously, Star Wars obviously was obviously a huge success. Did you know that George wanted to do additional films from the get-go?
Yeah, well, he had talked about it. Obviously, I think he was pleased that Star Wars was such a big hit. He said to me when Star Wars previewed up in the Bay Area, and I saw him afterwards, I said, "How'd it go?" And George, of course, is always soft-spoken. And he goes, I think it did pretty well. It may do James Bond type, box office. But he was never boastful. And that's part of the thing that I loved about him. And he was very generous.
Oh yeah.
With giving out points and as much as he could, but he was not one to praise in dailies or anything, to say, well, that's a really good shot. You were expected to do good shots. If you didn't do good shots, you wouldn't get invited back. So that was the highest compliment, to be called and come back and work on Empire.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I think when we were doing the one for Star Wars, you mentioned that you came aboard the film when it was already in production, so you came in fairly late in the process. Yeah. You probably obviously started a bit earlier on Empire, I'm guessing.
Yeah, a little bit, but on Empire, I was working on the black hole, so I didn't want to leave too early on the black hole and then go. But so it was pretty quick, and I was still kind of thrown into the mix late. The asteroid sequence had all been shot by Dennis Muir and his crew. So I just got there and dug right in. I was very fortunate because Ralph McQuarrie had stayed on, and George said, I'd like to see him help you out with the matte paintings as well. And then Michael Pancrazio, Empire Strikes Back was his first film, and he was assigned to do the backings for the miniatures. So they were full-size backings, but that was a genius idea. First they were going to shoot them blue screen, and then now everything was almost, it was a dream team.
Yeah,
it had so many good people doing so much incredible work. And as I've told many people, the pressure was much more on Empire. Yeah. Because people were saying, well, the first one, it was good, but probably one and done, a fluke. What next? Ooh, there's first matte shot that's done by Ralph, or the exterior. Yeah. Which is interesting because, and I don't want to point out something that nobody notices, but Ralph did that shot, and then I did another exterior that looks somewhat different. Ralph's style is as an illustrator. Yeah. My style is as a blend in, not try to make it totally, I don't want to say done by a dead hand, but done as if it was gritty in its reality. Yeah. It's very, very difficult for for people to understand that, and mad artists, you know, there's good ones, there's bad ones, and there's ugly ones. No, it's not ugly ones. It's like everything else. But when you look at Empire Strikes Back, everything seems to work. With the steam in the background and the turn and the look of Princess Leia, and it's so good, it's scary.
It is, isn't it? It's just like Star Wars, perfect filmmaking on every level, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks easy. No,
No.
if you think it's easy, then you're doing it wrong.
Yeah. So you're saying your style was very different to Ralph. I'm guessing that from what you're saying that your style is perhaps more sort of naturalistic, like if you're looking out the window sort of thing, whereas Ralph is a bit more stylized, a bit more embellished. So is that?
Yeah, I think that's a good description. It was, I loved working with Ralph. We shared the same space, and he said to me, I don't want to know about the technical side. I don't want to know about doing a wedge or exposures. Just I leave that to you. Just let me paint.
Yeah.
And I was his boss. I'm going, okay, buddy, take it easy.
So obviously, from the first Star Wars, you were obviously one of the guys, and obviously Empire, you were the mat supervisor. How did your promotion kind of come about?
Well, the first one, I was moonlighting, so I would go in late to ILM, which was located in in a suburb of Los Angeles at that time, and it was so I never really knew much of the crew because I was working on Pete's Dragon during the day. I'd go home and have dinner and then drive over to ILM, which was, I had a night crew, but most of the people weren't working there. So it was very isolated. And we had no idea what we were working on because George never showed a rough cut or anything.
Yeah.
So you're kind of, well, okay, what's the other side of the Millennium Falcon look like? Because they only built a full size piece of the one half, and I'm painting kind of, I don't know, what am I doing? It was very disconcerting. But still, you kind of felt that this was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it looked great. The production illustrations that Ralph had done, that's what sold it to me.
Oh, yeah.
I was sold that, would you like to come work on this movie? But sure, yeah. I don't know what the story's about, but it looks great. And plus, I signed up in a heartbeat when I found out that George was directing Star Wars, and because he directed American Graffiti, one of my favorite films.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're full time on Empire as opposed to, you say, sort of moonlighting between.
Yes. So then, I left Black Hole. I went up to Northern California, where ILM had relocated to Marin County, which is across the bay from San Francisco. Gorgeous place. And the first day I walked in to ILM, there was Phil Tippett, John Berg, and two other people. I'll remember their names in a minute. And and they were working on the walkers, the AT-AT
Oh,
coming
yeah.
in. And I'm going, oh, look at this. This is gonna be so great.
Mm.
And the pressure was on.
Yeah.
I was not going to be the weak link in the chain. I didn't want anybody to say, you know, the Empire Strikes Back was great, but those matte paintings, not sure.
Because the workload on this film was, well, there's maybe 3 or 4 times the matte paintings that were in the first Star Wars. So you must have been again up against it because of the workload, I'm guessing.
Yes, up against it, and everything was being built from scratch. So we shot the matte paintings using front projection mainly, and then doing the burn-ins with the lasers, and we're all, you know, just trying to make it work. He, the, the ambition of the piece, of the effects, not only the production shooting, but was really crazy to build things from. And of course, I said, well, you know, the matte department, we need to have a very steady camera, and so I want it to be built on the ground floor, on concrete. And I got there, and they said, it's upstairs. I go, what? It's upstairs. Every time somebody slams a door, the whole, you know, there'll be a little bit of shake. And okay, I tell you what, we'll put a red light downstairs, so when you're shooting, they'll know to close doors nicely. Well, the red light was on most of the time, and everybody started ignoring it. It's like,
oh dear.
It's okay. It was God, it was a blast. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, sounds like it. So I remember Irvin Kershner saying that when George Lucas asked him to direct this film, he didn't think it was a good idea because he thought, well, how do I follow Star Wars, one of the most successful films ever? It was like taking on a poison chalice, I guess. Did did you or perhaps other members of the crew feel the same way, that maybe it's best not to do a sequel, or how, oh my God, how do we make this better?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, Empire Strikes Back is probably one of the most successful sequels ever. One could say, you know, Godfather 2 was an amazing film, which is true. But at the same time, it was part of Godfather 1 and 2. So this is a little bit different. This was more separate. Eventually, Godfather 1 and 2 were cut together. So, which you couldn't really do with this. So it was unique in its own way. But oh God, you look at these shots, just stunning. I'm in the snow, uphill both ways. George, what are you thinking?
Yeah, because obviously Tunisia was obviously very difficult to shoot for various reasons, and then of course he goes to Norway to shoot.
Yeah,
has similar sort of problems, you know. But you know, I think, you know, one of the worst sort of winters I think they had for many a year when they got there, and of course to have white backgrounds with visual effects. I mean, everybody must have said no, don't do that.
Yeah, no, it's way too ambitious. But you never tell George it's too hard. He'll just, you know, rub his beard and go, you know, just kind of look at you and do you want the job or not? Because there's a lion outside.
Oh,
It'll
yeah.
take over as soon as you go.
I mean,
Look
probably,
at these shots. I mean, they're just magnificent.
yeah, they are, aren't they?
The way it's all choreographed.
Yeah, it's stunning, isn't it?
Yeah.
I get a sense that George is probably one of those people. If you said you can't do this, he would want to do it even more. One of those sort of, you know.
Well, if you say you can't do it, you won't get called back for the next gig,
Yeah,
or you may not even last that gig.
yeah. So you like that challenge. You like to push when people say, "Well, you can't." You didn't perhaps. I wouldn't have thought you'd like to be in a box. You know, like.
Well, the you have to remember. I had to remember that, don't complain, don't explain, and if you think you have a better idea, you better be able to defend it,
Yeah.
and don't just say, "Oh, George, I don't like this shot." It's like, okay, well, shut up. And he was never rude, but he was determined. If there was something that that you wanted to contribute, you better have a really good reason. And we'll come to a shot later on that I'll explain, that we had not a difference of opinion, but I had an idea that I thought would make it a little more dramatic, and he actually bought it.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So he was not inflexible at all, but you better be able to have a good reason and not just say, "I don't like that shot." Well, what do you suggest, smartass?
Yeah, it sounds like a really good be able to listen and because not everybody can do that as directors and
Well,
producers.
he's also understanding that people he hires. He's a I to his credit, he really has an understanding of how to get the best out of people, and how to give them not enough rope to hang themselves, but how to let them contribute in a meaningful way. But as I say, you better be prepared to explain why you think it's a better option. And I did have an opinion on some other shots, and don't get me wrong, I didn't do this very often. And he said, "No, I like it this way."
Fair enough.
Especially when you're getting to the visual effects is tough. Well, production is tough. Everything's tough. With the tauntaun and having that opening shot of the helicopter going down tilts down to see the tauntaun coming across the snowfield, and there's a matte painting.
Oh yeah, these generators, yeah.
Yeah. Which means, tracking that frame by frame, and it took many tries, and they were able to do that and pulled it off.
Because I think, as you said, Phil Tippett was the guy responsible for the stop animation. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was Phil Tippett, and John Berg. Yeah, Phil. Well, Phil is Phil, and he's hugely gifted, talented, smart, and and really adds so much to anything he works on.
Mm.
And that's pretty cool.
Are we coming up to matte painting here, I think?
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
It is, isn't it? Just where you take a sort of, well, an already very good set and then sort of expand it like that almost completely seamlessly. You know,
Well, Ralph had done the side shots, and because we obviously had to split up the work, and I took the wide shots because I could see what Ralph had done on the closer shots, and then kind of, it's working backwards, but then kind of incorporate his genius into the wider shot. Most people wouldn't do it. Here's the greatest shot ever. See the guy in the middle? Oh, God, great. The turn, the way he walks off. I mean, this makes the movie. That was me.
So how did your cameo? I was going to mention that. How did your cameo come about in the? How did that happen?
George had shot the scene with characters in England, but it was against a piece of set that didn't look like ice.
Right.
It looked like a mohair rug. It just didn't work, and he hated it, and he kept, so we came up with some ideas. He came up with some ideas how to save it, and finally he just kind of threw his hands up and said, no, we'll reshoot it here. And first everybody's going, oh, you got to get the actors over, bring them back, it's going to be expensive. And he said, George suggested, I want the art department and the matte artists to be in there. And I thought, this is great. So we had to try out in front of Irvin Kershner for the roles. And so Joe Johnston got picked to say the lines. I came in a distant second, so I got to do the nod and walk off. And then Michael Kelly came in third, and he's standing there. And then there's a nice cameo of Ralph walking in the background.
Oh, lovely.
And I think there's Mike Pancrazio's way in the background. So that was exciting. That was a big deal.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
It was great fun. There are quite a number of matte paintings, including in here when you see the top. Now we call them set extensions.
Yeah.
So, God, it's just so corny, but it's so good.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So were you surprised that George wasn't going to direct this film? Did you think what was your opinion on somebody else coming in?
Well, I heard later, I think, well, maybe at the time, but George hated directing. He loved editing. He loved, but being on set, according to, there's my version of The Outside, which is more organic.
Yeah, it's quite different, isn't it?
So I heard later from Marcia, um, who I saw about a year, 2 years ago at a reunion, for which was lovely to see her.
Hmm.
Um, that George would, she'd have to literally drag him out of bed during production on Star Wars,
Yeah.
uh, because he just did, he was so uncomfortable uh, directing. And that's why uh, Kirshner got the nod for the
Hmm.
second one, which everybody at the time thought, well, that's a different choice.
Hmm.
Why wouldn't you get some, sci-fi guy? But
Yeah.
when you think about it, that's not the point. The point is understanding the essence of the film,
Yeah.
the, what people call the arc and all those kind of things, but where to do this and how to sell that, and you see foreground cutting pieces. It's brilliant.
Hmm. It is. It is.
Yeah, look at this. Look at this. Oh, jeez, that's crazy good.
Yeah. And it's hard to believe that most of it is well, certainly with all the walkers behind it, it's a painting, and
Yeah,
you, I didn't.
it's about 12 by, yeah, 12 by 15 feet.
Hmm.
I Michael Pancrazio is absolutely a genius.
Hmm. I don't know how many times I saw this as a kid, and also in 1997 when they released the special edition versions. I went to see them
Look
in
at
the
that.
cinema because they were
Yeah,
released, and not a clue that it wasn't, that it was a painting, that it wasn't something more physical. Um,
and also, as I was saying earlier, the idea of shooting in a snow environment
hmm.
is just an invitation for disaster,
Yeah.
because it's so bright. You got to balance it, and there should be matte lines all over the place.
Hmm.
But Bruce Nicholson in Optical and Richard Edlund both kind of combined to come up with new techniques, how to do things, and it's just, this is even better than I remember it.
Yeah, it's really good, isn't it? Because you remember them stressing about it at the time and sort of thinking how they're going to.
Oh yeah, it was there was a lot of testing done, and eventually you kind of have to finally just do it and keep your fingers crossed.
Hmm.
Uh, the choreography of these shots, because there's no video tap that you can see, but you've got to figure out how the snow speeders would theoretically work with the flaps going up on one side or the other, and doing that pretty pretty difficult stuff.
Hmm.
That's why I won an Oscar for best visual effects.
Yeah, 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 well deserved. I think one of the things that they did in the special edition was to sort of clear this up even further. So, because obviously it looked really good at the time, but again, I suppose it was one of the sequences where they were slightly limited, and therefore I think they took a few lines and things. But I think
Yeah,
um,
absolutely. The there's a there's some degree of debate about how much you enhance and change things.
hmm,
And this, I think it's all fine. I don't have a problem with it.
no,
If yeah, if you can afford to do it, which, and it was George's money.
yeah,
You know, eventually the bank said enough. You know, we got to cut you off.
Yeah. Because I know that one of the tricks they used to hide some of the things that they couldn't work out at the time was, so when you're seeing the rebels through the cockpit of the snow speeders, they made it a little slightly it was a slightly blurry, so you couldn't quite see some of the things. So obviously they could clean all that up in '97. So these sort of enhancements is what the breakthroughs in technology are for, in my opinion. So I think, you know, it's perfectly justified to do little changes like that.
It's always tricky when you've got different elements you have to integrate, not only the movements, but the depth of field. Uh, there's a lot of stuff to worry about, and it's God. Look at the setups here are just the angles. Everything works.
Hmm.
The dust, the snow, that shot was always very difficult for optical to do, as Luke falls into the snow.
Hmm.
Um, it was a tough one.
Was it tough because you had that live component of the actor in there?
Yeah, I think, and as I just looked at it now, you can still see a little bit of a dark matte line
Hmm.
that comes over. As you pointed out, uh, motion blur is really difficult to deal with, because when you have blur behind an object that's moving, as you would in real photography,
Hmm.
blur isn't in front of the. So a lot of people in effects think, well, we blur the whole image. No, you only blur behind the image, because you don't see any blur in front of the image.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a chicken.
Yeah, it seems quite random having the chicken walker there, because obviously they appear in Return of the Jedi, but that's being shot. It's almost like a throwaway, isn't it? In this one.
Yes, George, like, is similar to great filmmakers in that you've got to find a happy medium between putting too much into a scene that distracts from the story,
Hmm.
and highlighting why, what are we looking at. And I think sometimes, uh, especially with the special editions, and I shouldn't be too critical, but you don't know where to look, because there's so much going on, adding little greeblies and zippies and this and that. You're thinking, what am I supposed to feel about this shot? How is it getting me to the next shot? What's the purpose?
Hmm.
It's easy for me to say.
Yeah, I just see what you mean. Some of the new effects, I think, in Star Wars, especially in Mos Eisley, kind of do distract from what you should be focusing on, and the whole idea of putting a visual effect in front of Alec Guinness and his performance seems a bit outrageous to me. Sort of, those sort of things we're not so happy with, but in Empire, it seems to be far more subtle and much more of a enhancing the picture in the best way.
Yeah, yeah. The camera moves are brilliant. the composition. The one thing that will always impress me about a good movie is that we have to always consider that we're viewing something that's on a screen and it's two-dimensional. So the challenge is to create the illusion of the third dimension and not just see people, kind of on a stage running. I'm not expressing it well.
No, I do see what you're trying to say. Yeah. I mean, there was some talk that George was going to do 3D versions of all of the Star Wars films. If Disney tried to do a 3D version of the original trilogy, how would that affect your work, but also the other?
I wouldn't say it. I boycott Disneyland. I'd have a big sign out in front of whoever's in charge of Disney these days, and I'd sneak in and write spray paint graffiti on their desk.
I think I'd be helping you as well, to be honest. I think a lot of Star Wars fans would.
That's not. I've worked on a 3D project, which was very difficult, and no, it's distracting, and the whole convergence, interocular distance, just it's not reality. It's a forced reality. And then that's why it gives you a headache.
Yeah. Your eyes can't. It's not a natural thing for your eyes to.
Yeah. Our eyes are amazing. They can. There's software in our brains that is allowing us to see depth and see things in front of each other and move our heads slightly and know where we are. Otherwise, we'd walk around walking, into walls and hitting our head because everybody, most people, that's how they navigate.
Yeah.
It's how you get to the car or the whatever, and you open the door. You see this. You if it's dark, your eyes adjust, and then you open the door, and you have the spatial understanding of sitting down in the car, in the seat, closing the door, and operating this extremely complicated thing. So
because they did do, I think, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I think that was released briefly in 3D. So they've done one of them already. I think that was back in the early 2000s. They didn't. Whether they looked at the original trilogy and thought it would just be too complicated, because I assume that once you start to add a 3D element to it, all the visual effects would kind of come undone a little bit.
Well, yeah, as I say, I was very proud of our work on Captain EO, but it was a freaking nightmare.
Yeah.
It was crazy, and I don't know. By the grace of God, it turned out okay.
Yeah, I think 3D is sort of becoming less popular than it was, and I think it was.
It's a gimmick.
Yeah, this major thing, which turned out just to be a throwaway gimmick, and I went to see a few 3D films just to sort of see what it was like, and animations and things like that seem to work very well, but to see something else like The Hobbit or things like that in 3D just want to tear your eyes out by about 45 minutes into it. So
yeah, well, you're asking your eyes to do something that's not natural, and Yeah. Then you have to wear the stupid glasses.
Yes. Yeah. Not attractive, are they?
Don't go away.
Okay.
What do you think?
Very cool. Lovely.
Now it's all 3D. It's like you're right here. So I saved this pair from Captain EO.
Yeah, I remember having I think there's a few films that I bought on video and DVD that had those kind of 3D glasses. And as far as I'm aware, they did absolutely nothing at all to the picture you're watching, really, as far as I could.
Well, it's a whole other animal, especially when you're asking animators to animate, effects animators to animate for the left eye and then animate for the right eye. Great shot.
Oh yes, really good, this
genius.
So did you do a lot of the Dagobah planet stuff?
Yeah. A lot of it was Ralph, thankfully. And a lot of it was added elements, like the birds that are flying in. So that meant it had to go, you had to do the painting and then send it to optical. And Ken Ralston, which shot the birds separately, go motion, or it was pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, apart from Cloud City, which obviously we'll get to later, but this is, perhaps the main concentration of matte paintings for quite some,
Well, you also the challenge was because optical needed their time, so you had to find the order of what paintings to finish first, and leave the ones that could be composited in the matte department last. So optical didn't have, crunch time is pretty scary, because it's, some people say, well, what do you mean by crunch time? I said, well, the distributors of the film and the theater owners plan ahead for releasing the film in theaters. And at the time, there are 2,000 theaters in the US, or more. And they're not going to be real happy if you say, can you give us another week? Because it doesn't work that way. So you got to find a way, and it's the deadline, individual deadlines along the way. You can set them all you want, but there's only one that counts, and that's the release date.
Yeah.
And in those days, you had to also give the Technicolor or whoever was making the release prints time enough to make those release prints and ship them.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a matter of, oh, today's the release date, let's finish the last shot, and it'll just magically appear on a screen in Idaho.
Yeah.
It was, a lot of sleepless nights.
I mean, yeah, I can imagine. So are you saying that some of the matte paintings would be sort of shot in cameras they were filming, or was it all always done
It
in
was
person
always afterwards.
afterwards?
There were no on-set glass shots or hanging miniatures. So um, it was just a matter of saying which ones can we do in the matte department with, at the time it was, we were using front projection,
Hmm.
and which ones we have to do to get down to optical so they can do their magic.
Yeah,
So that's a case of prioritizing
right.
stuff,
Yeah.
which is it's kind of juggling.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
the more work required on a shot, the earlier they needed it.
yeah. And if you're not organized, you're going to be dead meat.
I think another interesting thing about Empire was obviously that obviously George came up with the story but didn't write the script. Again, was that a surprise that he wasn't involved in the screenplay?
uh, mm, yeah, I think it was a bit of a surprise, but there was this kind of, I mean, Lee Brackett was gonna write, was writing the script,
Hmm.
and then unfortunately died.
Oh,
So that throws a bit of a spanner in
yeah.
the, as the English would say, into the
Hmm.
into. I think the if it's not on the page, it's not on the stage.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's this alchemy of making everything and making, you can only adjust so much because then you've got to be committed, and so you got to find a way,
Hmm.
and you can't just keep experimenting and
No.
say, well, we could do this and that. This is a crazy idea, this Yoda thing.
Yes.
I mean, George, what are you thinking? But he said to me um, at one time, uh, he said, well, it's important that we have a narrator. And I didn't want to use a voiceover.
Hmm.
So I came up with the idea of Yoda, who explains everything to, to Luke. And then again, get Frank Oz to do the performance.
Yeah.
It's just, it's unbelievable.
Hmm.
Really cool.
Because obviously I think the look of Yoda was based upon Stuart Freeborn, the makeup artist, and also
Yes.
I think it's a
Yeah.
cross his face and also Albert Einstein. I believe it's like amalgamating the two. Um,
Yeah. And I also think there's an organic thing to it. And later on, when you get the CG Yoda, just doesn't look right.
no, it doesn't, does
Too,
it?
it's too clean. It's too sanitary.
Mm.
And
And I know
and
when they did the
lighting is so good.
I know when they did the Last Jedi, one of the new ones, and Yoda has a little brief appearance, and they decide to do it as they did here with a puppet in exactly the same kind of way, entirely against George's philosophy of doing it with the best technology available. And I think it looks a lot better than the prequels because you've got obviously that physical mass that you can't fake with computers.
Yeah, critical mass. That's, yeah. That's a very good description. Look at these sets.
Hmm.
Uh, the lighting, the amount of cinematography.
Hmm.
And oh, by the way, you don't want to have characters that have shiny surfaces because if you're going to shoot them against blue screen, you've got a lot of mats that won't pull.
Hmm.
So that then, but like I say, you don't tell George no.
No. I suppose the other thing like getting the shadows right on the objects and the
Yeah,
spaceship might be sort of.
yeah, incident light, all that stuff,
Hmm.
shadows.
Hmm.
Don't. This is all wrong. If this was a student film, I'd say no. What and what's with the hair?
It's slightly better than the Chelsea Bun look from the first film, but yeah, it's still quite again very sort of unique and perhaps sort of alien looking, which I guess is what they were going for, something that you wouldn't see down the high street, I suppose.
And what's going on in the back over the things that are spinning around the red lights?
I know when they used to do Star Trek, they would have running gags. The art department, they would have things that had that it was goes nowhere, does nothing. They just had abbreviation of each of those words appear on the consoles and things, because obviously you say that they look, what is their practical purpose?
Yeah. Well, map painters are known for sneaking in little bits of uh, personal graffiti, if you will,
Yeah.
um, and hoping that the producer or the director won't notice. But some kid in Duluth will write a letter or something.
I don't know if the version that you're watching here has the original Emperor or the one that became established later on, because obviously that was one of the more recent changes.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I'm looking at this is not the original.
Hmm.
This is,
Yes, Ian McDormand, I think he did Return of the Jedi, and obviously they filmed him, I think, when they were doing Revenge of the Sith, and they filmed him so that you had the continuity of the actor, which I kind of understand reason for it, apart from, of course, the poor original actor is no longer in the film. But
yeah. The top is a map painting set extension.
because again, if you were trying to make the sets, for real, I mean, you sort of
Well, your job is to extend the set and make it cheaper than building it.
Yeah, because the budget was obviously quite significantly bigger compared to Star Wars. I think it was, maybe three
Yeah,
times the budget. I think it was $30
I
million
think,
dollars.
yeah, you're right.
But even so, it's so ambitious that if you didn't have all these all these tricks, you just wouldn't be able to make the film.
Well, the production design is amazing,
Mm.
just like everything.
Mm. Because it was Norman Reynolds, wasn't it, or who was the production
Yeah,
designer?
Norman Reynolds.
John Barry being on Star Wars.
Yeah.
Did a different production designer change anything from your point of view, or?
Well, Norman Reynolds was quoted in an interview when they asked him about matte paintings, and he said, "Well, actually, he has an English accent." So he said, "Well, uh, you don't want to you don't want to have a matte shot stay on the screen too long because then you'll see that it's a matte shot."
Yeah.
And I sent him a nasty letter. I think he sent something back and apologized, but yeah, it's a good point. That's why you get a good matte artist, so you can fool people.
Yeah.
As you know, it's Craig Barron's wonderful book called The Invisible Art. If people notice, then, you know, I would say it's a thankless job. Yes, you get paid and you're part of a brilliant piece of creativity. But, you know, my aunt at the time in Pennsylvania might go and watch the film and have no idea what I did. You know, she's not going to be nudging my uncle and going, "Oh, look, there's Harrison's work." So, but that's part of the intrigue, I think, part of the being part of the whole, as I say, the magic, the watching this stuff that I did work on in dailies and just going, "Whoa,
yeah,
it's really clever."
So at the time, you say you didn't get any real recognition for your work. At what point did you start to get annoying people like me come up and say to you, "Oh, you worked on Star Wars," and when did you start to get that recognition and people wanting, your autograph and to talk to you about your work?
Well, I think that was my job, not to get recognition. And so it only built over a number of years, and it took even the 80s, 90s. Nobody really cared about the matte paintings or the backings, or they just cared about the story.
Yeah.
And they cared about the characters. And it was fine by me. I think eventually, of course, it became a big deal, and I'm blessed by all the wonderful movies I've been associated with. And at one point, I thought I want to have a little bit more control, so I became a visual effects supervisor.
Hmm.
and that was also a lot of sleepless nights
Yeah.
because now but I was able to, as I moved through time, pick and choose those people who I'd worked with before
Hmm.
on various films. And so the team became more and more elite. Uh, and I was very proud of that. I was very proud of what Buena Vista Visual Effects
Hmm. Yeah.
accomplished.
Hmm.
And it was a battle because everybody wanted you to fail.
Yeah.
They didn't, what do you mean? No, no, can't do that. Yeah.
So what was that a company you were involved with in terms of its origins then, in terms of?
I was just stubborn.
Hmm.
It's like, okay. Yeah, I wasn't always the most popular person on the production because I was loyalty is a two-way street,
It is. Yes.
and don't ever go behind my back if I'm the supervisor
Yeah.
and criticize somebody that's down working their butts off, you know, pin blocking on a camera and saying, and I had more than one come to Jesus talk with a exec.
Hmm.
So, but that what's the most important thing? The bottom line is not the money. The bottom line is the quality.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a good idea if you don't spend too much money.
Hmm.
That's why my sister, Linda Thompson, has been so successful as a visual effects producer
Hmm.
because she's not a pushover, but she understands the complexities.
Yeah.
And she staying within a budget, and you've got to budget this stuff ahead of time
Hmm.
and take into account what happens if it rains at an exterior location. What happens if this and everything that it's Murphy's law. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong, and keeping that all kind of juggling that is a real talent, and that's why Linda was so respected because she, as I say, she wasn't a pushover, but she wasn't unkind. She wasn't mean. But boy, you better have it's the same old thing. You better have a good reason
Hmm.
for coming in at saying, well, we got to do this, we got to do that. Yeah.
You were saying earlier about painting, some artists would sneak in a personal reference. Did you ever do that in any of your work?
Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, there's the infamous one, and the painting is still at Disney
Hmm.
in in one of the corridors, and that was on Dick Tracy.
Hmm.
And to say that Warren was a pain in the ass would be kind. He was, yeah, he was such a jerk,
Right.
um, and he would just torture everybody. Change this, change that. But we showed you the sketch. I don't care. I'm Warren Beatty. I don't care who the hell you are. You're pissing me off.
Hmm.
So he was he. on Dick Tracy. There's a final shot in the movie, which Dick Tracy looks amazing. I mean, wonderful design, and it's a pullback, and with fireworks going off, and it's a pullback, and Warren would fixate on the tiniest thing, and I'm sure it was just to piss me off. And he'd say, should it be Hotel Grand or the sign? Should it be Hotel Grand or should it be Grand Hotel? I mean, he'd go back and forth. So we'd shoot the shot. No, nah, I think it should be the other way. And it's just like, okay, whatever. Now, in those days, shooting shots, you had to go back to start and put in all the elements one at a time. There was no button on the screen that you could just say, change this bit, but don't touch anything else. So it was hugely frustrating. And eventually was probably the last chance we had to shoot the shot. And so I put in Hotel Grunt, Grunt. And he never saw it.
Oh, wow.
And you can see the painting at Disney hanging in one of the hallways. And whenever I take somebody over there, I show it to them.
That's lovely, yeah.
It's a gotcha.
So it's a film that you were probably quite proud of, but was a real challenge to, mostly from Warren's, directing his presence and his changes, really.
I'm sorry, ask that.
So you're saying that Dick Tracy was a very difficult film, obviously mainly because of Warren, but you were very proud of the end result.
Yes. Yeah. Nobody cares viewing it in a theater. How, it was hard to do that. So what? I don't care if nobody's going to say, did you have any personal problems? I happen to own a bowling alley in Bakersfield, and I'm just wondering, what's it like? So, no, you're expected to do a good job. I've said that. Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
I don't want to. Yeah.
So I was wondering, what was it like working with Irving Kershner?
He wasn't involved in post-production. So I didn't meet him until years later.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And it always seemed a bit odd to me, because if you're the director, I would think you would want input, but that's the way George compartmentalized things.
Yeah.
So, and of course, one of the people that was so supportive and so helpful was Gary Kurtz. And he once told me I made a bit of a faux pas when I was called. I was working on Empire. I was called by a journalist for People magazine, and he wanted some sort of scoop about Empire Strikes Back, and so I was on the phone with him, and so I gave the interview,
Mm.
And then I said something about, well, you know, Irvin Kershner wasn't involved in the effects, something like that.
Mm.
And they published the interview, which became a whole thing about me. It's kind of, I regretted it at the time. And Gary Kurtz, who's never had a harsh word, but he came to me and he slapped me on the wrist and he said, Harrison, you don't give interviews without clearing it with me or
Yeah.
George.
Mm.
And I thought, oh God, I, that was not cool.
Mm.
And when it, the comment about Kirshner was not, did not make Irvin Kershner very happy.
Mm.
So I learned my lesson.
Yeah, sort of an innocent thing that you wouldn't think would cause a problem, but obviously because of the politics.
We're all very sensitive to criticism, and that's why honesty is not always the best policy. Or you just say, I can't really tell you. I don't know that much about it. And it happens all the time where there's divisiveness about certain items, but yeah, especially now in a very sensitive time of Me Too and those kind of things, where I wasn't there. I don't know what really happened. So he said, she said, somebody else said, fine. I don't have an opinion because eyewitness, and it happens all. That's why, lawsuits and eyewitness accounts. And well, was there somebody who, is there video footage? Now there's video footage of everything. But just do the right thing.
Yeah, that's all you can do.
Even though it's the difficult thing.
Yeah.
It's nobody's going to be happy. Not everybody's going to be happy.
Oh no.
There's always somebody who's just willing to, topple the statue.
So it's interesting that Irvin wouldn't have sort of had the final, wouldn't have signed off on the completed film, really, in a way that a traditional director would have done, because George and Gary were the ones that were probably supervising everything, and probably the dramatic side of the film. But obviously, the final version, I assume he gave notes occasionally, but it sounds like he was very much.
Yeah, it was well, it was unique in a lot of ways. The areas of responsibility, and Gary he was so great, and he was always diplomatic, and he was always, trying to keep it on track. And I really respected him, and I really liked working for Gary. And people say, well, will ask me, well, why didn't he come back and work on the third one again? I say, I don't know. I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Well, he did this, he did that. Oh, okay. And when George didn't like going over budget, I know that. It's always, why does it have to cost so much? Well, I don't know. Ask somebody else. It's because you want to say, because George, you're a freaking perfectionist and it costs money to keep, you know, it, how many times you're going to repaint the Sistine Chapel ceiling before eventually somebody goes, isn't this good enough? No, shouldn't the fingers be touching between God and do it again.
Yeah, I know. You got to know when to leave it alone.
Yes, and good enough is not good enough, but sometimes it's finding that balance. It's a Zen thing.
So as an artist, how do you know when a painting is done? How do you know not one final brushstroke and then it goes too far? Is it just an instinctive thing that happens?
Self-doubt is part of the process, and it's my father, who was such a wonderful artist and filmmaker, visual effects, and that just had the eye. But even he would, much to the chagrin of my mother, he would be painting fine art, gallery art, and then she would say, "Okay, lunch is ready," and or dinner or whatever it was, and he'd bring the painting in to the kitchen or the dining room so he could look at it while he was eating. So, he said, yeah, because he had to ruminate about, is it working or isn't it working? And that became, I understood that at a certain point in visual effects. Sometimes the shot isn't working and you don't know why. But why you get the big bucks is to figure out why and then to make that change so that it works. It works in the context of the film. It works in the context of the environment, and it's seamless, as close to perfection as is humanly possible. But breaking through that last bit, and I still, on occasion, will see a shot in a film that I was responsible for, and I call them wincers. If you're watching it again on cable or whatever it might be, and the shot comes up and you go, oh God, just let me have one more go at it. and my girlfriend will say, and I'll be watching something with her, and I go, she goes, what's the matter? I said, but didn't you see that? She goes, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. It looks fine to me.
Yeah,
well,
critical.
I'm allowed to have a bad day, as it were, but brain surgeons aren't allowed a bad day every day. You're operating on somebody's heart or something. It can't be like, God, it's Monday. Geez, the weekend, I tell you, I've got a hangover that won't quit. What are we doing here? Here's a bit of my bitch. All the too much stuff going on here. George, leave it alone.
The new stuff, isn't it? Because obviously I think.
Yeah, Greeblies, buildings over here, over there, everywhere.
So is this one of your map paintings coming up as they go across the?
This I'm very proud of these.
Hmm.
I did these. And Ralph did the classic shot with them
Walking across.
walking down. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Hmm. It's such a stylistic look to the cloud city. It's
Yeah,
almost like a dream. It's sort of got this sort of beyond, beyond realism and.
look at this. God
Hmm.
damn, that's good.
Hmm. It is like looking into a painting, isn't it? But a real.
Well, it's got the atmospheric perspective. It's got
Hmm. It's got the realism, but it also has something magical about it as well.
yeah,
Without it looking fake, if you know what I mean. Sort of goes.
Ralph.
Yeah.
Without Ralph McQuarrie, there'd be no Star Wars.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely not.
I miss him.
So obviously, Ralph was part of your department on this film. How big was the map department on Empire roughly compared to say the Star Wars?
Star Wars was me and Joe Johnston. Came in and saved some shots that I couldn't get right. Um, look at that. It's a great shot. Uh, we, but there were only about a dozen or so match shots on Star Wars. So we expanded the department because there were 80 on Empire Strikes Back. And so we added Ralph, Mike Pancrazio, and then had so Craig Barron and Neil Crepola. Craig, who's now Oscar winner, highly regarded effects person. He came to me one day. He was just out of high school, and he came to me one day and he said, "Harrison, this is on Empire." He said, "Harrison, what time will we be through tonight?" And so I gave him the lecture. I said, "Craig, look, we're only done when cutoff time comes, when we have to get the film to the lab." Gave him the whole thing about you don't understand it. He said, "Oh, okay." He said, I want to know when to tell my mom to come pick me up." I said, "You don't have a driver's license? You don't have a car? What's wrong?" But today we're still very good friends, and he's really a great guy and wonderful person, and I see him often. But so it really is a good film.
It is, isn't it? It's
There is another.
Yeah. George seems to be so ahead and has such a perfect picture of where it's all going. It's the complexity of he's always sort of thinking one or two films ahead. It seems to be.
Yeah.
Did you ever encounter a gentleman called Alan Tompkins?
Who?
Alan Tompkins, who was one of the art directors on Empire.
I think I met him once.
Hmm.
Gosh.
He did a couple of the James Bond films. He did a couple of the combustion.
Right, yeah.
A View to a Kill. I think his last one was Casino Royale. That was 2006. So he had a very long career in.
This is a great shot. Again, Ralph.
Yes, has that dreamlike quality again, isn't it?
That's also this was an interesting thing, and it was one of the very few shots, in addition to his other responsibilities, Michael Pancrazio did.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Getting the perspective correct is more of a challenge because than some people would expect. Unless the matte artist is on the set, there'll be different lenses used. For example, a wider lens, and then you have to add on and fake this, because theoretically a fisheye would bend if you're doing that in the painting. You can't do that in the painting, so you have to kind of tweak it, and I couldn't do it anymore. I wouldn't know what the hell I was doing.
Because obviously it's a very different art form to, say, doing fine art or anything like that. It's sort of trying to be so photorealistic and having those perspectives and
yeah, it's setting up the different planes and putting, like I say, sometimes.
I mean, one of the questions I had that came in for tonight was about the colours you would use in your matte paintings, and how those might be different to, say, what you might use for traditional artworks and landscapes and fine art, and because obviously you're painting on glass and different materials like that. Is it quite specialised stuff you're using?
Not really. I early in my formative days, when I went to work in the Disney matte department, and I was an apprentice, and my boss was Alan Maley, who really was a great artist, and he taught me about perspective. He taught me about lens choices. He taught me about cinematography. He taught me how to paint on glass, which you wouldn't think would be a big deal, but it is, because glass by its nature is very shiny. So acrylic paints, which he also insisted that I use, which were usually up until that time, oil-based paints were used. So acrylics had a lot of advantages, and one of them was that they would dry very quickly, but you had disadvantages in that you couldn't blend them because they dried so fast. So if you're trying to paint an even sky, you couldn't just overwork it and get it, keep using a big brush to feather it into all the layers. And so you had to paint it, and then if it didn't work, you painted it over again. But to paint on glass, as I was saying, you have to put a primer on the glass, which we ended up using Krylon flat, not satin, flat spray paint. And you spray that on and then trace out the live action onto that surface, which is on the glass, and then scrape away the excess with a razor blade.
Right.
And that was the way to go. And I was fortunate to learn how to find the way to make a painting work in context. How to what works, what doesn't work. Don't call attention to the painting. That's not, the nobody cares about the big tree on the left that you spent, days getting leaf correct. Nobody cares. But at the same time, it better not call attention to itself because it doesn't look right. It's this very fine balance. And I see shots these days that are in movies that are amazing. I don't know how they did it. They actually go there because it takes place in a galaxy somewhere else. And I no longer, if it's a good movie, I just go, count me in. I'm on board. I'm not, if it's a bad movie, then everything bothers me. It's like, I can't believe they cut there. Come over this. Oh, God. Music cue, it's so long. And then I can't do this with anybody else in the room because they just go, Harrison, shut up. Can't you see that?
Anything that pulls you out of the film is just going to start to unravel it. So you're quite right. There's something wrong. It'll stick out a mile, and it'll just sort of,
Yeah. It's just, you have to care.
Yeah.
If characters aren't, that's one of the great things about Harrison Ford. He's always playing Harrison Ford, but that's what we want to see. We want to see that in a different milieu.
A lot of actors have their own, they are playing themselves, like Robert Vaughan was always Robert Vaughan in many respects. Roger Moore is always Roger Moore. Harrison Ford, the personality,
Yes,
more sort of stars, and then you had actors who were a bit more like water. You would pour them into whatever container you wanted, and they would form the shape of the character that you had. So
yeah, that's a good metaphor. Yeah, sometimes it's just the blocking, the bringing the character forward and then exit and across and the stand over here. That's not easy to do.
no.
I've directed one film, small, independent, and boy, God, look at that, Ralph.
I did want to ask actually about the film that you directed and how the opportunity to direct came about and how you found it.
Well, as I've said, often I was very fortunate because I learned I learned so much from my father, obviously,
Mm.
and I used to love to go to movies with him. And I remember one circumstance of going to see Clockwork Orange, and I'm sitting in the theater. It was at the Pantages, I think, and now it was a different one. Anyway, in Hollywood Boulevard, and Clockwork Orange is its own unique film. I mean, it's Kubrick,
Mm.
and I'm sitting there. It's this weird kind of psychosexual thing, and I'm thinking, my dad's not, he's not going to be into this. And we, so we had a routine. We'd go see the movie, then we'd go to, you know, very Hollywood, go to Musso and Frank's and have sand dabs, which was his favorite. And I'm walking out. We're walking out of the theater, and yeah, I'm waiting for him to go. Well, you know, that was a piece of garbage, or you know, whatever it is. Goes, yeah, just looked at me, nodded, goes, great film.
Mm.
And and of course, Kubrick has been, my father almost got to work for Mr. Kubrick on Napoleon,
Mm.
which never got made, which was too bad. But uh, there is the infamous Spartacus matte painting.
Mm.
Is that was was used, and it is now. Um, my sister and I gave it to the Academy Museum, which will be opening in September, hopefully on time,
Yeah.
or uh, this year, and that's going to be kind of cool.
Oh yes, yes, definitely. Yeah. So would you say so? Kubrick perhaps inspired you when you directed yourself? Was that it took influences from a lot of people like Kubrick?
I, what can you say? It's Stanley Kubrick.
Hmm.
I, I had a when I was working on Superman 4,
Hmm.
we were at had to be Elstree Studio.
Oh yeah, Elstree, yeah.
Yeah, I think. God, I can't remember. But I had an office, a rather large one,
Hmm.
and there was a desk and some stuff, and there were there were labels that said Hawk Films, which was Kubrick's production company.
Oh
And
right.
so I thought, look at this. This doesn't get much better than this. I'm sitting in Stanley Kubrick's office.
Hmm. Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
2001: Space Odyssey.
yeah. Yeah. It's a fantastic film, that isn't it? Um,
Yeah.
would you have liked to have directed more films, or were you quite happy with just the one?
Well, I think there's a T-shirt that people wear that says, "What I really want to do is direct." Um, I had an associate who was working on matte paintings with me on a number of films, and he said one day, he said, "You know what I really want to do is direct." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "You know, I thought it'd be a, you know, something because I have a story to tell, because I think that because I like to tell people what to do. Okay, why not?
That's a very honest answer, isn't it?
um, anyway,
So that wasn't you didn't share that feeling if you wanted
oh,
to.
I wanted to direct, of course, because I like telling people what to do. But it's also you don't know you don't know what you're getting into. You don't know what you're getting into. Every day, there's so many pieces of the puzzle that have to fit together, and if it's not one thing, it's another. The oh, the grip truck broke down. Oh, so well, we don't need that, do we? Do we need that? Yes, we do. Okay, well, what do we do till then? And so the answer to all the problems, you know, you're shooting someplace in wherever in summertime and it snows. And that's because the film company and the locals come up because it's never does this time of year. Okay, now it's pouring rain. What do? You shoot inserts.
Hmm.
So, or you shoot a shot. And I learned this from a great DP, Ted Ashton. And he said, I said, I've run out of stuff. We're doing a documentary on airplane manufacturing. I said, I've run out of stuff to shoot. He says, don't worry, I'll take it from here. So inserts, or have somebody walking along and then you just shoot their feet, you know, just to have somebody cutting carpet that goes into a commercial aircraft, and you go get an insert of the, don't know if you'll ever use it, but at least it's not a day wasted.
Oh yeah, it's keep yourself busy sort of thing. Yeah.
I think documentaries, if I would, I admire documentaries, good documentaries, and they're not always easy, even though you think, well, you just have to, but it's all a matter of building the lovely background here. Oh, look at that sky. Jeez. There it is.
This is one of yours, this one, isn't it?
Yes.
That's a lovely, lovely shot that.
Yeah. Yeah, documentaries. Here's a whole bunch of stuff. Now make sense of it.
Mm.
You know, it's a challenge.
Oh yeah, yeah. Did you do any miniatures on this film?
Do any what?
Miniatures.
Oh, miniatures.
Yeah.
Well, the shot of Slave One is actually a photo cutout of a miniature. So I went, waited for the magic hour when the sun was coming down, took the miniature, which was about that size,
Yeah.
and took it out into the empty lot next to ILM, and took a still camera. I think I had a Hasselblad, and waited for the time that the light was just right, and took a couple of shots. So then had it enlarged onto a print film, put that on glass, cut out the canopy so that I could airbrush that in, and then I would take little bits and enhance them, and of course painted the platform.
Yeah.
And then also shot some of the miniature buildings and I painted those on, so I didn't shoot those. So, and it worked. It became, you know, one of the iconic shots.
Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean, would you say that matte paintings is more difficult than doing fine art, or is it just a different um, specialism?
uh, it's all part and parcel of of, of the whole shooting miniatures is still a matter of scale and understanding the intricacies of cinematography and depth of field and lighting and all those. So you bring a lot of things to the table. Uh, it, when doing that, it you know, now we're getting some really good stuff here.
Impressive to this, isn't it? And again, just think of all the optical work on the lightsabers and
Yeah,
shot after shot after shot of. Again, some wonderful matte paintings behind him and some lovely shots as we get forward.
yeah, full size backing.
Mm.
This blew me away. Nice painting.
Yeah, that's really good, isn't it?
Great composite.
Mm.
If you look into, you're going to see the same painting redone a couple of times, and you look into one of the sides going down, there's HE that I snuck in there.
Oh, that's very nice. Yeah, no, notice anything like
No,
that.
I
Yeah.
can't even see it these days myself.
I mean, with filmmaking.
No, George, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. I quite like,
Something out of Star Trek.
yeah, I mean, I quite like some of the shots that you can see out the windows now, and I suppose it gives you a sense that it's not a claustrophobic set in Elstree, but I suppose it is a fine line between going slightly too far and, as you say, distracting
Yeah,
from what's
exactly.
going on.
You go, well, what am I now? Where am I?
Yeah. I mean, with films so expensive these days, you know, would going back to matte paintings and older techniques lower the costs? Would you think, or films become too complex that it wouldn't be doable?
It's a different world
Hmm.
because now you have almost too many choices. Oh, God, I hate seeing that. Oh God.
Yeah, just takes the eye off, doesn't it?
Yeah, just keep it simple.
Hmm.
See, Ralph clouds in the back look like marshmallows. Sorry, Ralph.
It's a lovely shot when they take off as well. It just looks so,
Yeah.
so fantastic.
So,
Again, I suppose that's the key to having Kirshner on there, someone who's so character driven to balance all this action, I think, that's happening.
that's Ralph.
Again, this is as well, isn't it?
Yeah, we tried very hard to make this not have that band that goes separates the live action from the matte painting,
Yeah.
but couldn't get the match,
Mm.
and that was again. George kept saying, "No, I got to make a match," and finally said, "George, it's not working." So he reluctantly agreed to the band.
Right. Yeah. And again, you don't miss.
There's a bit of a faux pas because you're seeing as they go out onto that gangway or whatever it is, there's a glow indicating that down under the shaft,
Yeah.
it's light down there.
Hmm.
But when you see the fall away, he goes, and this was one of the things that George relented on. I said, George, he needs to fall into not a glow, into a darkness, into an unknown. Let's make it. And he said, okay. So now when you look down there and you see he falls into this unknown, and I think it really heightens the suspense. That if he fell into a glow, why doesn't he burn up?
Yeah. I think you were saying on Star Wars, you didn't have the script, you just had what you were working with. Did you have more of the script to work with on this? Obviously, apart, you wouldn't have obviously had the big reveal, but
well, obviously we didn't have the yeah, well, also the art department, Nilo Rodis and Joe Johnston and Ralph, the whole thing had been intricately storyboarded. So that's it. Where's the AG? I can't find it. So that was half the battle.
Yeah.
It really was.
So would you have had the complete script to work off, or again just sections of it?
So I didn't have the script. I had the storyboard, scene by scene.
That's what you were working on, yeah.
Yeah.
So again, I suppose like seeing Star Wars, when you saw the first assembly or the first preview, or whatever, that was when you saw kind of
that was, yeah. Well, I think George realized. Nice painting. Thank you. I'm such a smart.
And again, is this your stuff here?
Yeah, that's a painting.
It's incredible, isn't it? And that is one of your paintings.
Yeah, originally George suggested that this would be blue screen and everything would be everything would be painted behind, and but at some point he realized that would be too difficult to pull off, and so he didn't want to, trying to save money.
Yeah.
But eventually he came to the conclusion, I've got to build the set of the underside of the thing.
Yeah.
She did. And here these backgrounds, brilliant.
Yeah.
To find, it's so ambitious because you've got to, oh, that's dreadful. God, that's awful. That's nice. Yeah, the aerial shots shot by, I can't remember anybody's name. That's a great shot. That's a great shot. That's a tricky one.
Yeah, it's absolutely perfect, isn't it?
Yeah. This is so corny.
Well, I suppose again, the films have that sort of, it has a Saturday matinee serial flavour, doesn't it? So of course these stories are perhaps, sort of, I think
Yeah.
reasonably derivative, but done in such an elegant way. I mean, when you came onto this film, I imagine a lot of people thought, well, Star Wars was such a huge hit. Money's not going to be an object for this one. We can do kind of whatever we want. But of course, George was putting his own money into the film, so there was, a surprisingly tight budget for such a sequel. Did that surprise you as you went along?
Yeah, a little bit, but it was again, ambitious, crazy to do it that way, but not so crazy.
Yeah.
And keeping that tight control over George's story, creative input, everybody else's adding to it, and things like this when the frustration of the ooh, uh, so it's wonderful. That's a Ralph painting.
Oh yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess you would have seen the film ahead of its premiere before you. Or,
No, no. We saw it at cast and final film saw a cast and crew showing 3 days before it premiered.
hmm.
So that was fun.
Did that have?
Oh, just sitting there going, wow,
Hmm.
not too shabby.
Hmm.
And being with people who, uh, you knew you had shared sleepless nights with time come out, right? But the anxieties, the the late hours. Yeah, I moved up to Marin County, bought a house that was under construction at the time. So it's kind of culture shock in a sense.
Hmm.
And uh, didn't see much of my son.
Hmm.
I don't know how old he was. He was very young.
Hmm.
Uh,
It must be hard to work on a film for such an intense period of time. You must just live and breathe the work that you're doing. So it must be very difficult to balance your other parts of your life, I imagine.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, but when you saw the cast and crew showing ahead of its premiere, did it have the false ending on it in terms of "I am your father," or did it have?
Had
Did
the I am your
yeah, because obviously originally I think it was obviously a big secret, and I think Darth Vader said, Obi-Wan killed your father. So the whole line is Obi-Wan told me the truth. He told me you killed my father, and the false line was no, Obi-Wan killed your father. And then of course it was Darth Vader's lines were redubbed later just to put up so of course it wouldn't be spoiled. But I'm guessing you
Yeah,
saw the final.
you're
Final
right. Very well kept secret.
because it must have been quite difficult, I would have thought, to go for the first film when nobody had any expectation at all, and you could probably left the script on the bus and nobody would have picked it up, to every single thing being so secretive. Did,
Yeah,
how did you feel that pressure as well of, oh my god, I can't go and say what I've done today, and
absolutely. Yeah, expectations were huge. And like I said earlier, I didn't want to be the weak link in the chain. And this was reshot, the background there. Originally didn't quite work, and I think Dennis Muir came up with the idea of doing the sprinkly stuff. Boy, it's so long ago. I can't remember.
I think it was washing powder flakes or something.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
but I did hear that the film was almost about to go into theatres, or maybe even been playing a couple of theatres, and George wants to change a couple of the exterior model shots and visual effects.
yeah. So he came back and reshot stuff, even though it had been released in theaters, and then so it's hard to find the original version. But eventually, as I said earlier, it got overly
worked. Yeah.
No, do we really need this?
I mean, out of all of them, it's the one that's been least touched up. It's the one that is the closest to its original release, probably because it was so well done in the first place.
Yeah.
Meet Peter.
Met him once.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brian Johnson. Yeah.
Yeah. What was like Brian?
Say that again.
Did you work much with Brian at all, Brian Johnson?
Yeah.
And obviously, Robert Watts was obviously the producer for.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even though the voice of the Emperor, Clive Reveal, isn't in the version anymore, it's nice they have still kept his credit up there. But I've always found Robert Watts to be a really nice guy, because he does a lot of UK.
Yeah. Dilly, he and I became good friends. Yeah, boy, I look at these people. Amazing.
Yeah, the careers that these people had before and obviously after Star Wars.
Yes. And Bert.
So integral to Star Wars is the sound, isn't it, of the the spaceships, and Chewbacca and R2D2, and and up down to the very subtle sounds.
Patty Carr, Mickey Herman.
But Bob Anderson, met him. Bob Anderson's a very nice, but was a very nice guy. He was Olympic fencer, and he did all the stunt, the lightsaber.
Well, there's this whole now thing about there need to be more females and more diverse and so on and so forth. But if you look at these credits, there's a lot of women who worked on it.
Yeah.
A lot. And I didn't care who was in the matte department as long as they were good. I was like,
I mean, you didn't seem to ever think that it was just a boys only club. It was
no,
whoever was talented was there. Sort of thing.
no, what? No. Joe Viscoso. God. uh, yeah.
You get special edition credits, and it's nice that people like Ben Burke did
I think
that continuity.
it always, I, uh, I think having a credit, seeing your name is really important.
Yeah.
Notice there are more digital matte artists on the revised edition than were on the first.
Yes. Yes.
So it took 4 people to do the work of 2.5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh God. Uh, Back to credits. I was very happy that on Tron, when we made a deal with somebody, because I started on it very early in the process, I put on their deal memo, if you, for some reason, if we find a way to get you credit, how would you like it listed? Your name, your job title, whatever you may be, and we achieved that, and still to this day there are studios, production companies that say nope, can't have too many credits. Well, why? Just don't allow that. It's just stupid. So on Tron, everybody got a credit, including the ink and painters at Cuckoo's Nest in Taiwan that did all the rotoscoping and all the inking and the painting, which was a huge job. So I asked them to send credits, and they sent it to me, and it was in Chinese. So that's what we ran at the end of the movie. And for all I know, it says "Die Imperious Yankee Pigs." I don't know. Fine by me. And I think that, as I say, that's what we want. We want to get paid, but more than anything, we want to get credit.
Well, absolutely, yeah. It's always nice to be recognised for your work, isn't it? And you want that credit, of course. Because on Tron, weren't you also a producer or executive producer? Didn't you have additional credit on Tron?
Associate producer and shared credit with Richard Taylor as visual effects supervisor. So that was nice. And then, yeah, and Richard got a second credit for, God, I can't, not so long ago, but well deserved, and of course worked with wonderful people. Sydney, can you imagine?
So what sort of additional responsibilities did you have on Tron that got you that credit?
God, I I'd come back to Disney. They wanted to hire me as to oversee effects on as a suit with an office to oversee effects on old Disney films.
Yeah.
And then Dick Tracy came along, and I was suddenly thrown into the mix. Didn't really like it. Yeah, there's such a. I fought with everybody.
Mm. And what's the reason why you didn't return for Return of the Jedi?
Because I was working on Tron.
Oh, so it's the two just sort of.
Yeah.
Scheduling.
Yeah. I don't know. I have no regrets.
Mm.
I didn't work on the Tron sequel. Wasn't asked. Okay, everybody said, "Well, Harrison, what happened?" Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose you can't do everything, can you? So it's sort of just sort of.
Sometimes it's just I don't know. Can't do everything.
Oh no, of course not. I was wondering about Mary Poppins Returns, because obviously your father has such a lovely credit on that film. I think it's map painting inspired by the legendary Peter Ellenshaw. I think it was lovely to see that.
It was.
Yeah.
It was a surprise to see it. Yeah, that was very special. I wish he had been alive to see that. He would have liked that.
And it was just so faithful to the look of.
Yeah, they didn't have to do that.
No.
So it's a tribute to my father's artistic skills, his involvement in films, and he earned the trust of so many people and didn't just do paintings. He was like similar to Alan, did title sequences, did second unit, was so well respected. He wasn't inflexible, but he was not going to let something go that wasn't right, whether it was shooting a plate, a second unit, whether it was organizing, doing all that. A great deal of, and I'd like to think I inherited a great deal of pride. And, for every problem, there's a solution. Yeah. And sometimes you don't know what it is. And then you're just flying blind and hoping the muse will strike. But you can't wait too long because there's a negative cut date, there's a release date. So it's not a matter of sitting and going, the muse has not struck me today. So I'll just have another beer and wait until it does. No, you got to get off your butt and get in there and fight the battle. And my father would say to me, he said, people would assume that he his his gift was painting, and that it would be easy. He could just, sit there, watch television, and let it all kind of flow.
Mm.
He said, it's never easy. It's a battle because the painting will fight you, and
Mm.
you have to beat it. And the metaphor is the similes is true. And
Mm.
I've found that it, all through my life is, "Mm, can I get you? I'm not going to let you win."
Yeah.
So it's competitive as hell.
Mm.
And it's also, there's professional jealousy in a sense that there, there are, there are wonderful matte paintings, effects. And I go, God damn it. Geez, I wish I could have done that. But I think that's human nature.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your fine art, because obviously you did do some art with your father, and obviously went on to galleries, etc. What was it like to do that with your dad and work on pieces collaboratively?
I think at a certain point, um, let me go get another water. Can I do that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Please do, please do. Yes, so I was just sort of saying about how it was like to collaborate with your dad on this fine artwork that you did together, and how did those sort of projects come about?
Uh, once I once I worked on Star Wars,
Hmm.
and it became Star Wars. My father, my father always had Mary Poppins and numerous other things to his credit.
Yeah.
So I felt a certain. I came up to his level.
Hmm.
I had resisted doing matte paintings because I thought I'll always be known as Peter Ellenshaw's son, and he's so well respected, so admired. There's no way I can do that. But it worked out. And then we started he started to do fine artwork and artwork based upon Disney. It was Disney fine art or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
And, he'd get to a certain point on a painting, and he didn't like painting figures. You know, real. For example, there's one of Peter Pan, and so he'd paint the environment, and then he'd hand it to me and say, "Okay, you finish up doing the figures, like the figures in the movie," because his was more of like, nah, I don't want to bother with that. So it was a great. It was great. I didn't mind doing the figures. In fact, I liked doing it because that's what people wanted. When you do, you know, artwork, the point is to trigger the emotion in the viewer. This, I remember Mary Poppins. Oh yeah. So all those fond memories come rushing back. That way, if they buy a Chiclet or the original of our artwork and it's hanging on a wall, there it's a story. It's not the piece of art. Actually, it's a story behind it. And when friends and relatives come over and they say, "Oh yeah, oh that's from Cinderella." Ah, oh, God, I love Cinderella. You know, everybody says when I first saw it, you know, who I was with, and that's what you try to trigger in people. And the same with fine art. For my father was that he loved to paint, and he had a house in Ireland for a while and he painted cityscapes. He painted incredible the number of genres or the number of environments that he could paint, and it was very gratifying to me when I my work would be. I have some of my originals hanging in my living room, and people who will come in first time they visit my house and go, "Oh, look, it's this, and this," and they would say the same thing to my father, and he would do these wonderful seascapes, of which he did many, and people would come in and go, "Oh, I love that seascape. That's Mendocino, right?" And I thought, no, it's not. My father would go, "Yeah, it is. It's Mendocino." It's actually Hawaii, but who cares? It doesn't matter what you call it. It's the emotion. It's the story. It's the warm and fuzzies. It's the triggering of where we've been in our lives, what we've been able to enjoy. And I think that was his goal. That's why he loved doing it. Oh, yeah. He painted. He was he was always trying something new. And at one point he was painting these huge paintings of seascapes and crashing waves. And I came to visit him when he was living up in Santa Barbara, which is about an hour and a half away. And the painting was huge, and he wasn't using a brush. He was using a towel, and he was dipping it in the paint, and he was scrubbing it like this. And I just go, you know, he would say to me when I was first learning, and I was trying to get everything so right, he'd come in and he'd look over my shoulder. He'd go, "Don't tickle it." And I go, "But I gotta get every detail right." He goes, "No." So stop tickling it.
And again, that just comes with confidence, doesn't it? I
Yeah,
guess.
it's a story I've told many times, and I would he, he was so good that you know when I'm trying to figure out, and I'd be tickling it, so he'd come in and go, "Give me the brush," and I'd have it go, "No," and so I'd go get a little wider brush. He'd go, "No, bigger brush." No, bigger brush. And soon it'd be it'd be a house painter's brush. It'd be this big. You just go, then, as I say, sometimes, and then he would, Alan taught me this, Alan Maley taught me, when you're going to do rocks and you want texture, you take a piece of paper and you crumple it up. And then you dip it in the paint and then you dab it onto the thing. You don't dab it the same way. You got to keep changing it. It's nobody buys a painting and cares about the degree of difficulty. This is not high diving. You don't get extra points for how difficult it is. I don't want to hear your sad story of like, there's a lot I miss about it.
Oh yeah, sounds like a fantastic person. I did want to ask you, did you always want to go into the fine art? Was there a point where you wanted to leave, consciously drift away from films and you wanted to do art exhibitions and that sort of fitting that part of you as an artist?
Well, I kind of fell into doing art because I majored in psychology just so I could, keep my student status alive and not get drafted. This was the height of the Vietnam War, and so I kept that going for a while, and then eventually I graduated, but I was accepted to officer candidate school in the Navy officer candidate school in Newport, Rhode Island, where I learned what the opposite of sunny California was, going to Newport, Rhode Island during the winter and shoveling snow just to get out of the wherever you stay. God, it was, I got frostbite on my ears. I was miserable. And I had to stick with it because I'd signed on the dotted line and, taken an oath. And so I had no idea what I would do after I got out of the Navy, got demobbed, as the English say. And so I started looking for a job. Nobody cared that I served as a junior officer on board a heavy cruiser. Yeah, what's it? No, we're not going to give you a job. That's not experience. That's just a stupid idea.
Was this during the height of the Vietnam War, or was it?
Yeah, in fact, the Tet Offensive was in January, and I think that was my second month at officer candidate school. And I figured you once you get your commission and become an officer, ensign, shiny new ensign, then they ask you what is your preference of where you would like to be stationed. And I think I came up with something like, Navy base in San Diego. I'd like to be the movie officer, make sure the 16mm movies come, something cushy. And I said, or maybe Mayport, Florida, or so, something sunny, perhaps assigned somewhere in the Mediterranean. And they took that into consideration about for half a second and then said, no, you're going to be on a heavy cruiser out of San Diego. I said, well, gee, that doesn't sound exactly plush. And they said, oh, and by the way, it's not in San Diego. It happens to be in the South China Sea, lobbing shells into Vietnam. Suddenly, boom, here I am. It's loud because these are big guns and they make a lot of noise. And I'm thinking, what was I thinking? This is nuts. And as you're lobbing shells in there, they don't like that. So they send shells your way. I'm there. I go, you hear them going over the ship, luckily never hitting the ship. And I was not as bright as I thought I was. I got out of the Navy, couldn't find a job. My father, I didn't want to go into what he had done, as I said. So I spent 6 months, getting turned down by the personnel department at Pactel or whatever it was, or, now it's called human resources. So I was a loose end. And my father said to me, I know you don't want to do this, but Alan Maley can't find apprentices to come work because nobody wants to paint like a photograph.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a sort of specific art form, isn't it?
He said, Alan said to me, just do it for 3 months, 6 months, I think it was. And then if you don't like it, you can go on. I was hooked. I fell in love with the process, with the whole making something that was creative, that had a story, that wasn't always easy because you have to say to yourself, why is this shot in the movie?
Yeah.
Is it adding to the movie or is it just taking time out for a little breathe? And I learned about, I was like a sponge. I wanted to learn everything. Fortunately, my father had always had a camera with him when everywhere he went. So I had this same habit. I reference, pictures, and had an exciting time. It's a great time getting in a helicopter with no doors on it, flying over Manhattan. So I could get shots looking down for Superman 4, looking down on the Empire State Building. Where I had to lean out the side of the helicopter. I've always been a little uncomfortable with heights of any kind. Again, how did I get into this mess? And a Hasselblad, wonderful camera, 2.25 size negative, but the magazine is detachable because there's only 12 exposures, and so you detach it, and then you have to either reload or get another magazine to snap onto the back to keep taking pictures.
Hmm.
Now you run out of that. Now you have to reload with the film and you stick it in the thing. Meanwhile, the helicopters, you're thinking, okay, don't drop anything. It was heady stuff. It was never the same. Never this. You never do the same shot twice. You
Hmm.
never do the same shot twice.
Hmm.
So
Was there any time where you would do a painting and for a film, and then it would be cut because the scene was cut, or was most of your work by that point the film was fairly locked in, so your work was always there? It never really ended up on the cutting room floor.
well, the process is that, and sometimes people say, well, you do the painting first and then you go and film the live action. I go, no, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
And they kind of puzzled by that. And I think it's a matter of kind of getting inside the writer, the director's head to try to see what they are seeing, what they want to see, how they want to this to be part of their vision. And oftentimes they don't know. They don't know what they want.
Yeah.
And that can be very frustrating. Work. Just want to jerk you around just for fun.
Yes. Yeah, it must be very difficult. I mean, like you said, with Warren Beatty, I mean, that kind of situation.
Hotel Run.
Yeah.
So there.
I'm gonna look for that next time I watch that film.
Well, there's some other things in certain shots that
I'll try and find them. Do you still paint, Harrison? Do you still?
Yeah, a little bit. It's much more of a struggle than it's ever been because my coordination isn't quite, I'm not as steady as and I saw it in my father as he got older. He just didn't quite have it. It's similar to sports. At some point, you got to face the fact that you're no longer Michael Jordan. You're an older version of Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And that's tough and I can see why people want to play no matter how much money they have, how many trophies, want to play just one more season, just to hang on to what you had.
Yeah.
And it's not everybody who can win a grand slam and then walk away. Just keep wanting to go, oh, I want that thrill, that victory. And I admire people go, that's it, done. Bjorn Borg being a great example.
Yeah.
Go, oh, I don't have it. I had it, but now I'll go do something else. But you have to be very careful because then whatever you do, you're not going to be as good as you were what you did before. So how do you know when to get off at the top when you don't know it's the top? I got one more to do. Hence, your question was, I did I used to work for, I told you, Disney Fine Art Collector's Editions and do interpretive pieces. And then that kind of went away because there were the new kids on the block doing impressive work. And, but I did a commission, I think a year or 2 years ago.
Hmm.
And that was fun, but it was tough. Oh God, it was tough because I kept. So what should have taken me, a week, it took me probably 3 weeks.
Right.
Just trying to, grab the brass ring one more time.
Yeah. So it sounds like you felt you got out at the right time in terms of visual effects and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I've got a pretty good resume if I want to get another job.
Oh, yeah.
Although they say no, sorry. We do it differently now. Sit back there,
Yeah.
old guy. It's okay.
Yeah, it's a very strange attitude, isn't it, for new people coming in to just dismiss, the old way of doing things. And but I
Yeah.
suppose it is life, isn't it? I guess.
One of my, I have many favorite films and TV shows. One that I really enjoyed and doing was Hercules and Xena,
Oh yeah.
which I came on after they had been started, and so I was granted an interview, and I remember going to see the producer and looking at me, and she was looking at me and going, "Why are you here? You're so overqualified." I go, "Okay, well, I just want to do it. I want to have that." And it was a wonderful experience because it was episodic television. There was huge pressure, but if it did, remember the producer, the creator saying, "Well, if it doesn't work, we got to air it this week. We'll just get beyond that and do a better job next time." And I thought, well, that's a easy thing to say.
Yeah.
It's important. So eventually I became kind of a consultant and wasn't actually, I was doing sketches and then other people were doing the artwork. And I remember a very gratifying moment of going to see dailies one time. And I would always sit in the back and let the hands-on people do what they did, which was always amazing. And one time there was a discussion between the visual effects people going, "There's something wrong with the shot, and this, that, and other thing." And so I let them kind of talk it out. They were still a little bit hesitant. And they turned to me and they said, "Harrison, what do you think?" And I said something like, the sky needs to be a little bit lighter or darker, this or that, or you're not matching the horizons. And it was like they a collective head slap, and they go, "Oh, of course." We couldn't see it, but it's like, well, sometimes you just gotta butt in and say, "You're overthinking it."
Yeah.
It's tough, and like I say, the work I see these days. It just is absolutely wonderful. Commercials, you know, commercials that, yeah, I just, I've seen, I remember, God, so long ago, but that's where creativity is really important
Mm.
because you've got to sell something, but you can't oversell it. And so it's going to, if you're constantly bombarding an audience with selling aspirin or a car or whatever it might be, you've got to find a way to be memorable and to be relatable. And
Mm.
being relatable isn't easy.
No.
And now that every car I see looks like the same other car.
Mm. Yeah. Mm.
So how do I decide why it's a mystery? And am I going to be impressed because there's an ad of some sort of car, you know, spinning around in circles and driving like crazy all over the place. And then it says, basically, do not try this at home. It's like, well, then why? What am I supposed to do? I'm sorry, officer. I bought it because it was really cool looking when it was going over sand dunes, right? That's what I love it.
Oh, yeah, there's so much wonderful creative stuff coming out, isn't there? These days, I don't think it's as good as the golden age of of your fathers and obviously your work, but it was a different world, isn't it, in terms of how it's all put together.
Yeah. Uh, there are no filters anymore.
Hmm.
And that brings up all sorts of moral and ethical issues. And so everything I watch, I watch with a cynical eye.
Yeah.
Uh, and I, I don't like that that's what the world's become because everybody lies. Well,
Hmm.
don't they? And, I don't want to get political, but we're still in this country, we're still under the dark cloud of what's his name with the funny hair.
Yeah.
What a complete moron, cretin.
Yeah.
People voted for him, and those people are still out out there. Now that doesn't make them bad, just makes them complete idiots. Okay, never mind. We're not going to go there.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. So instead of sort of things moving on and becoming clearer and more simple, it becomes more opaque and it becomes more complicated, and you don't know who to trust either. It's all very
Yeah, it's who do you trust, and uh, uh, I know, we think we know,
mm,
but we don't know. Uh, you have to you have to trust that you have to trust something, otherwise you trust nothing. And it's not to get all
mm.
philosophical about it.
I'm a
You have to,
big uh,
you have to
sorry.
do the right thing. Just do the right thing,
Mm,
even though it's hard. It's
yeah.
hard sometimes because somebody's gonna get pissed off.
It's almost in life you're rewarded more for lying, not sticking up for something, and there's almost no benefits apart from a moral obligation to do the right thing. We live in a world that kind of rewards the opposite.
It seems that way, but
Yeah.
but let's face it, you know what it is.
Mm.
if you have your beliefs or someone has other beliefs, and that's what you believe, even though it may go against my beliefs. Um, it, not to get political, but the Western world is still has bias in our society.
Oh, yes.
There's elitism. There is try as we might to be inclusive. But you know, if I'm driving through Beverly Hills and I see somebody in a car that has a ski mask on and happens to be having what looks like a gun, I'm going to make a judgment that they're not here to, you know, give out generous food baskets.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's tough to be just, you know, blind to not to be blind to a certain amount of things. But having said that, we're getting there. We're right.
The future can be what we make it, can't it? It can be, and it seems like we're going in a positive direction. So that's
yeah. Let's you know, it's a thing about camping. When you go camping, which I prefer not to do, leave leave the campground as you found it.
Yeah.
You know, pick up your trash.
Yeah, I don't know what you mean. With camping, I always feel that if we were meant to camp, then they wouldn't have invented 4-star hotels. That's my
Exactly. I don't mind camping as long as I can be back at the Ritz-Carlton by 5.
Absolutely.
That's funny. Yeah.
Before we wrap up, is there any final comments you'd like to make about Empire Strikes Back, or what the film means to you, or how Star Wars has touched your life? Anything along those lines?
I think I've said it all. It will always be very special. So many things in my life, and I was born with a silver spoon and raised in a loving, caring way, and I didn't always behave. And the main thing was that my parents understood but did not tolerate this behavior. And there were so many times, especially as a teenager, and even as I got into my later years, that I was, and I say the same thing about raising children. I have 2. As a parent, they're going to fall off the tracks every now and then. They're going to, you know, they're going to try something that they're just curious about, even though everybody says no, it's not a good idea to do that, and they may do that. So they fall off the track, and your job is to pick them up, put them back on the track, say, what did we learn today? What did we learn? And set them down the road. You can't be overprotective. What was your childhood like?
Yeah, pretty good really. I mean, I'm an only child, so I had all the attention focused on me rather than having, so I got all the presents at Christmas and that sort of thing. So I don't really know how to share even to this day. So so yeah, no matter what disagreements my mum and dad might have had in their relationship, their love for me was always something that they agreed on. So it was a lovely childhood. You know, you can never compare it to what other people have, obviously, but I always, yeah, I felt like I had a blessed childhood, and especially when you hear other people's stories as you get older, or what my mum and dad went through, far, much more strict, and because I don't think that, my parents now are very much like my friends, and I don't think when mum and dad grew up, it was these are your parents. They're not necessarily your friends. They're sort of distinct. There's like a slight distance there, and obviously my relationship has obviously changed as I've got older, and it is very much like my parents, but also it's a friendship as well. So it's not my my mum and dad are like my best friends as well, which is obviously it's nothing.
That's
Yeah, it's nothing we can't talk about. We're very open, and I'll say to my wife, I was talking to my mum about this or my dad about that, and she'll say, you talk to your parents about this, and because she has much more of a traditional, relationship. There's certain lines you don't sort of cross, but even though you're a parent, you still live, you still went through the same things that your children go through, and all that sort of thing. So so I think I have a quite yeah.
you have children?
Not that I know of, but no, not yet.
No.
Um,
Here's my advice.
hmm.
Don't.
That's the general advice I seem to be getting from people, really.
and and I I have two children,
Mm,
and I thought that after the first one came along, I would learn all the lessons the hard way of parenting.
mm,
So when the second one was about to be born, I thought, I got this. I know the do's, the don'ts. I got it.
mm.
Well, then Hillary came along and she said, not out loud, she goes, nope, I got my own set of rules. You're in for a surprise, buddy. And yeah,
Mm.
so I, I don't condemn, I don't condone. Do what you want to do, but uh, I have no regrets.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I always thought a bit like parenting must be a bit like a painting. You sort of obviously it's it's you it's your work in terms of it's your offspring, but at a certain point your hand has to leave the painting and it goes off and it does its own thing. So I always thought there was sort of an artistic
Yeah,
metaphor there.
hopefully you've built a good foundation and they can build their own version of the house. But
Mm,
you know,
mm.
and every now and then I want to go, ah, really? This is what you're doing? But
Have,
I,
have your,
I
have
don't.
your children followed in your footsteps? Have they sort of gone into the industry or?
Um, no, my son is a is a he's a songwriter, a musician. He's very creative. He occasionally will do paintings. He's he's had successes. He's gone on tour, but never break out group wise, he's organized different musical groups he's been in. And my daughter, I'm very proud of her. She went to she graduated from UCLA and then got her master's in fine art from University of New Mexico, and now she's living in Toronto, Canada, with her husband, who's a big shot at Google.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and I miss her because she's inherited my father's sense of humor. Both of them have, and we occasionally talk, and she's her own ball of energy. She was a yoga teacher for some time, and I remember saying to me one time, she said, "Dad, thanks for putting me through school, and I'm sorry I just became a yoga teacher, and those years of studying fine art and with an emphasis on Latin American art turned out to not be put to good use." I'm fine. She goes, "Well, you want your money back, Dad?" No. Okay. Well, now that I think about it, so yeah, a lovely, lovely, lovely life. Was married for 26 years.
Oh, wow. That's very good, yeah. I'm up to 18 months so far, so
You're just a rookie.
Yeah, we got married just before the lockdowns set in November 18, and then of course because we were thinking, oh, should we delay it another year? And so glad we made the right decision to do it when we did, really.
Are you planning when everything opens up on going on a honeymoon, some exotic romantic place?
Yeah, we were thinking. Yeah, because obviously we haven't had a chance to do anything yet, so we're thinking of maybe Japan in a couple of years. That might be quite
Excellent.
something, a bit different, and
I love Japan.
So there's lots of tours you can do. You go up the volcanoes and on that side of hiking up a volcano appeals to me. So
It's a beautiful country, and it's a whole nother culture of it's just yeah. I did a number of shows there, if fine art. Somewhat sexist, but I'm on the fine by me.
Yes, it's to our advantage not the other way around, isn't it? Really, but yeah.
It's just it's the Shinto, the thing. It's very they put a lot of emphasis on the soul, the inner person, and the respect, and yeah. If I could, not that I would, but I wouldn't mind living there.
Yeah, we've seen a few documentaries on Japan, and yeah, I see what you mean. It looks like a nice life, not in the big cities, but in the other.
Yeah, yeah. The big cities are fun. The hospitality is overwhelming, and yeah, like it. Good choice.
Yeah, that's the plan. So just see what happens, I suppose. Um,
Well, we're getting there.
oh yeah, yeah. I think we're a couple more months we'll know exactly what's happening. Because do you come over to the UK at all these days, or do you tend to sort of stay where you're based?
I don't, well, just because of, I used to do a lot of traveling and I loved doing it. And uh, then just kind of all slowed with the lockdown. And,
Mm.
uh, but again, been blessed because I had art shows in so many different places in Japan. And I've been to Shanghai. I've been to, uh, I loved Hong Kong before it became Chinese. I don't know what it's like now, but evidently they're not, everybody's not happy about that.
That's right.
So, I got a chance when I was in the Navy to see the world.
Hmm.
Um, the Philippines, interesting, different. Every country has its uniqueness, and learning about that, and I think is a great education for.
Hmm. Oh
Uh,
yeah.
my daughter spent a semester in Florence when she was in school, and she hated it until the last week.
Hmm.
And by then she figured out all the ins and outs of how you do this and how you do that. And she, I joined her in one year when she was studying in Mexico,
Hmm.
and I flew down to meet her, and that was an adventure. Just the flight, and I forgot to change money here, and by the time I got there, it was late, and the pelting down with rain. I couldn't find a taxi cab, and I didn't. She wasn't there to meet me at the airport. She was wherever she was,
Hmm.
and so again, it was a crazy adventure, and seeing her the next day and have her take me. Uh, I say, well, let's get this cab. She goes, Dad, don't get a cab off the street. You go into the hotel and you order one from the concierge. I said, well, why? Dad, let me just handle it from here. You just so she would get it, and of course my Spanish is solamente un poquito, and she was pretty fluent. So and Hillary's is diminutive. She's a little peanut, and she'd get in to the cab and she'd just rattle off to the cab driver. There we'd get there. So we saw all the sights, and it was a wonderful trip.
Hmm.
And I think it's again part of having such a great life and great experiences.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I assume they why you have to get the taxi from the hotel is that they're on the streets. They would charge you, I imagine, or they. That's probably the
Well,
reason.
they'll take you out who knows where, you
Yeah.
know say, hey, it's an extra. It's just learning to work the system or finding somebody who knows the system is, because let's face it, you know, we're not like, it's like going going to Italy, which I went one time with my father because he wanted to take photographs of Venice. And so the airport is outside of Venice. And so you have to get, you can either get the Vaporato, which is a bus that was floating on the water from the airport to Venice or back and forth, or you can rent a private boat, a smaller boat that's not bus-like. My father would say, yes, you pay a huge amount of money to, as much as it would cost to buy the boat, but they get to keep it. How does that work? God. So it's those things that, yeah.
I suppose it's like anything in life, isn't it? Knowing the system, having the contacts makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it? Sort of knowing.
Well, you know, you're going to embarrass yourself, and not you, but I'm going to embarrass myself all the time because I learned at one point, I thought I knew, remember going to, oh God, taking the grand tour of going to Germany and then come driving back to Paris and then going through the Channel or whatever it was, and learning that how to say fill it up in the car.
Yeah.
Because they don't fill it up. You go in and they come out and you say, I have 3 imperial gallons of this or that or that. And so I learned to say il fait plein, which means fill it up. But when you go to France, they never understand your French.
Yeah.
So they just look at you and go, il fait plein. And my wife said, you're saying it wrong. Okay, how do I say it? So she go, il fait plein. There you go. Kept trying to fit in, but never did.
It's the trying, isn't it, that counts rather than necessarily succeeding, I think. And well, that's so much of life, isn't it, really? Just trying and see what sticks to the wall almost.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen next.
You certainly don't. Certainly don't. Well, I think it's probably a lovely point to leave it for now, House. And thank you for spending so much time talking to me about Star Wars. And as usual, I loved all the other places that we went as well. So I hope you have enjoy the rest of your weekend, and hopefully we'll speak sometime soon.
Anytime. It's my pleasure. It was fun.
Oh, real pleasure to me. Absolutely delightful to speak to you again.
Okay.
So take care. See you later. Bye.